Alright folks, so with some of those older Snare Saturday videos, I had the opportunity of showing you a late 60s Ludwig Acrolite, as well as another video featuring the Ludwig Standard Aluminum snare drum. So now in this upcoming Snare Saturday video, it's time to compare the two to see if there really is a sound difference. What's going on everybody, Nick Costa here, and in this video I'm going to be comparing the Ludwig Acrolite to the Ludwig Standard Aluminum snare drum. This is going to give you the opportunity to hear both drums back to back and make the decision on does one sound better than the other. Now before we dive into this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification. That way you're notified of any additional content that I upload to the channel. So it's safe to say that when it comes to Ludwig drums, specifically their snare drums, you really can't go wrong. This is also why vintage Ludwig drums are ridiculously expensive at this point, because vintage drums are highly sought after, and because Ludwig drums just sound really good. Now you might be in the market of a vintage snare drum, or you might be asking yourself, why are all these people going nuts over a drum that's ridiculously old? Now either side that you are on, you have come across a Ludwig Acrolite and probably have said, wait a minute, they're how expensive now? So let's introduce the Ludwig Standard Aluminum snare into the mix, because you might be able to find one a little bit cheaper, and there's a possibility that it's going to sound pretty close. So let's talk about the history of both of these drums for a second. Like I've mentioned in earlier Snare Saturday videos, the Ludwig Acrolite was designed to be a more affordable option to the Supraphonic. The Supraphonic was a chrome over aluminum shell and had 10 double-sided imperial lugs. Now to make it more affordable, they got rid of the chrome plating to make it just a raw aluminum shell, and instead of having imperial lugs, they put bow tie lugs. To take it one step further, rather than having 10 lugs, they brought it down to 8 lugs. So you have less lugs, no chrome plating, and you can lower the cost of the drum to make it more affordable for buyers. Now these drums were labeled as a student model drum, and they weren't really looked after because people would identify that as a cheaper version of the Supraphonic, because that's exactly what it was. But this drum had a cult following because of how great it sounded, specifically in the studio. And now if you search online, you're going to see that if you wanted to get one of these, you're going to have to pay a good amount of money for it. So let's go ahead and talk about that Ludwig Standard Aluminum drum. The Ludwig Standard line was designed once again to be a more affordable option. So it just makes sense that they're going to make a standard aluminum drum because, again, they are trying to make something more affordable for people to purchase. So rather than being a beaded shell like the Acrolite, this is a straight-walled flat shell. Now because this shell is a straight-walled or flat shell per se, that is allowing Ludwig to use the same lug on all standard drums. And Ludwig introduced a more minimalistic design lug because not as much time has to be spent polishing them, because once again, that helps them lower the production cost. So take that Ludwig Acrolite, a beaded shell with bow tie lugs, make it a straight shell and just have the standard lugs on it, and you're able to lower the cost even more. But once again, a lot of people just stop looking at them because in their mind they're thinking, well, if a Acrolite is a cheaper version of a Supraphonic and the standard aluminum is a cheaper model of the Acrolite, then that means that that drum is even worse, right? Well, not quite. Because over time, people started to realize how great these drums also sounded. And just like everything else with supply and demand, prices are starting to increase. So now, if you are in the market for a aluminum snare drum and you are unsure of what to go with, maybe a Ludwig Acrolite over a standard, and you're looking around and you're finding prices, and you might be able to find one a little bit cheaper than the other, this video should help you decide not only which one best fits your needs, but if there really is that big of a sound difference. So let's go ahead and dive in a little bit deeper about the specs of each drum. Let's go ahead and start with that Ludwig Acrolite. Now this Acrolite was featured in an earlier Snare Saturday video, and this is an Acrolite that is from the late 60s. The Acrolite, like I said earlier, is a raw aluminum shell. They took the Supraphonic shell and they just didn't chrome plate it to try and reduce the production costs. Now this drum in particular is outfitted with 8 bow tie lugs, triple-flange hoops on the top and the bottom, which again, since this is the late 60s, they should be 1.9 millimeters in thickness. Ludwig's P83 throw-off, as well as a round puck internal dampener. So now let's talk about the Ludwig Standard Aluminum drum, also known as the S102 model. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a straight-walled raw aluminum drum. It is outfitted with 8 standard lugs, triple-flange hoops on the top and the bottom, as well as the same Ludwig P83 throw-off. This drum also has a round puck internal dampener. So just like every other video in the Snare Saturday series, I'm going to play both drums through a few different tunings. I'm going to start out in the lower tuning and work my way up to a higher tuning. While I am in each tuning, I will transition from one drum to the next, and I will start out with both drums having that internal dampener disengaged, and then I will engage it so you can hear the difference that it makes. So, enough of me talking, let's dive into playing. Now, the beauty of both of these drums being the same depth, same diameter, and both being raw aluminum drums is that you can get them pretty close to one another in tuning. And it's also safe to say that the tuning range is going to be about the same for both of the drums. Now, of course, there's going to be a little bit of discrepancies because they do have different lugs. And although they are outfitted with the same drum heads, a Remo Ambassador X coated on the top and an Ambassador snare side on the bottom, the Ludwig Standard drum in this video is a drum from one of my schools, which means it is played a little bit more often than the Acrolite. So that top head might be worn out just a little bit more than the one that's on the Acrolite. Also, the snare wires on both drums are different. The Acrolite has a set of Canopus vintage wires, and the Standard Aluminum has just the generic Ludwig snare wires. So that is going to make a little bit of a difference in regards to the snare response. But my personal opinion, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. Either way, I would love to get your feedback and what you thought of each drum, so make sure that you leave that in the comment section below, letting me know. Also, if you have any other additional questions on either drum, or maybe you are looking for a vintage drum yourself and have a few additional questions, you can leave all of that in the comment section and I will try my best to answer them. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see some of the earlier videos from the Snare Saturday series, I put a link to the playlist in the description below. I'll also have it come up right here to make it a bit easier for you. And if you are interested in seeing those earlier Snare Saturday videos where I featured each drum individually, I've put links to those videos in the description as well. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up. That way it makes it a little bit easier for others to find it. And that is it. Thank you so much for checking out this video on comparing the Ludwig Acrolite to the Ludwig Standard Aluminum snare drum. And until next time, see you later.